I'm Teisha with Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, April the 3rd, 2014. Israeli and Palestinian negotiators reportedly met overnight last night to try and make some headway on peace talks. The Jerusalem Post reports, citing a report from Palestinian news agency Ma'an, that the meeting was a very difficult one, even hostile, with Ma'an sources describing it as a, quote, fierce political battle. It was attended by U.S. peace envoy Martin Indyk, chief Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat, and Israel's chief negotiator Justice Minister Tzipi Livni. It reportedly lasted between 7 and 9 hours, beginning last night and ending early this morning, without any real progress being made. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry said the disagreement that remained was, quote, not over the fundamental substance of a final status agreement, it's over process that would get you there. Kerry said it would be tragic for the parties to lose the opportunity to get to those real final status issues, and once again called on the leaders from both sides to step up and take action.
You can facilitate, you can push, you can nudge, but the parties themselves have to make fundamental decisions and compromises. The leaders have to lead, and they have to be able to see a moment when it's there.
Kerry left Israel earlier this week and is now in Algeria. Haaretz reports that Kerry spoke on the phone with both Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas late last night, and that in that conversation the leaders agreed to continue speaking until the looming April 29th deadline that Kerry had set into place for peace talks this past summer. Kerry, Haaretz reported, was expected to speak with the leaders over the phone again today. The all-night meeting follows Abbas's application yesterday to 15 international bodies, which we reported to you about, which he suggested was in response to Israel's decision to not release the last round of 26 Palestinian security prisoners this past weekend. Israel was looking for the Palestinians to commit to ongoing peace talks before going ahead with the release of the prisoners. Earlier this week, there were rumblings of a possible deal being reported about that would extend peace talks with the Palestinians into next year, have Israel release additional prisoners, and place a quiet freeze on building in the West Bank, and included the U.S. freeing convicted Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard. There has been no word on the status now of such a deal. And the Associated Press reported that the U.S. responded to Abbas signing the applications to the 15 international bodies yesterday, with the U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations Samantha Power telling a House panel yesterday that the U.S. opposes all unilateral actions that the Palestinians take to statehood. She said there are no shortcuts to statehood and that any unilateral actions could be tremendously destructive to the peace process.
Is as dangerous as it is.
An IDF vehicle was fired upon near the Gaza border fence this afternoon. There were no injuries reported, although the vehicle did sustain some damage. The IDF said the armored vehicle was hit by a Palestinian sniper while on patrol near the border fence. An investigation was ongoing. Another suspected price tag attack was reported this morning. The tires of 40 cars were slashed, and racist graffiti was spray painted on a wall in the Arab village of Jish, which is located in the Upper Galilee. Israeli police opened an investigation into the incident and promised to find those responsible. Commander of the Israel Police Northern District, Major General Zohar Dvir, called the attack a, quote, criminal, despicable phenomenon, and said that any attempt by extremist parties to break the law will be answered with immediate, determined, and uncompromising law enforcement operations. So-called price tag attacks are thought to be the work of Jewish right-wing extremists who randomly vandalize Palestinian and sometimes Christian and IDF targets in protest of Israeli government policy towards the settlements or in response to Palestinian terror. The northern village of Jish is home to approximately 3,000 Arabs, 2/3 of whom are Christian and 1/3 of whom are Muslim. Israel's President Shimon Peres will travel to China next week. The official 3-day visit from April the 8th through the 10th will include meetings and a state dinner with Chinese President Xi Jinping, who extended the invitation to Peres to visit. It will be the first official visit by an Israeli president to China in a decade. Ynet reports that an opera, which was performed by children at the Theresienstadt concentration camp 2 weeks before they were sent to their deaths, was performed by children in Israel for the first time yesterday. In 1943, the opera Brundibar, which was co-written by Jewish composer Hans Krasse, was performed by the children of Theresienstadt many times, staged by Krasse, who was sent there. The last time was in front of a Red Cross delegation which had arrived at the Nazi concentration camp to check its conditions of its Jewish prisoners. The children were later sent to Auschwitz to be killed. The opera has been staged in Germany, Austria, the Czech Republic, South Africa, Canada, and just last year at the Los Angeles Opera Summer Camp. But yesterday marked the first time that it was performed in Israel. It was performed by students of the Walworth Barber American International School in Even Yehuda, after the school's music coordinator Franny Goldstein came across the story. Goldstein also was able to locate one of the last survivors of the Theresienstadt ghetto who had actually performed the opera. 83-year-old Ella Weisberger now lives in the United States. She was in attendance at the performance in Israel yesterday, along with U.S. Ambassador to Israel Dan Shapiro and Israel's Education Minister Shai Piron. And the Jewish Week reports that authorities in Warsaw are promising to replace a wall that they have begun demolishing that bordered the square in what was the site of the Warsaw Ghetto. According to a report from the website Virtual Shtetl, workers began taking down the wall, which was apparently in great disrepair. The brick wall is said to be near the spot where Jews were gathered to then transport them to the Treblinka concentration camp. It isn't clear if that wall is the original one that stood there during the Holocaust, but President of the Jewish community of Warsaw, Piotr Kadlik, expressed that the wall was of historical and educational significance regardless. One of the founders of the Women of the Wall group has died. 71-year-old Rivka Haught passed away on Sunday from pancreatic cancer. Haught was a co-founder of the organization that fights for equal rights for women to pray at the Western Wall, and she convened the first women's prayer service with a Torah scroll at the holy site. She was also a strong advocate for agunot, Orthodox Jewish women who have been refused a religious divorce. At the Women of the Wall prayer service this past Tuesday, the group paid tribute to Haught and recited Kaddish, the mourner's prayer, in her memory. Haught was also a founder of the Women's Tefillah Network and the co-author of several books, among them a book about the Women of the Wall with Phyllis Chesler, and a book with Rabbi Susan Grossman called Daughters of the King, Women and the Synagogue. Grossman wrote in the Jewish Daily Forward that in Haught's passing, the world lost a valiant advocate for women. Rivka Haught is survived by 2 daughters and 6 grandchildren. And turning now to our Shalom TV programming for tonight, Thursday, April the 3rd. Coming up at 7 o'clock with the upcoming Passover holiday, Mark Golub discusses the 10th plague, the mezuzah, and the rabbinic notion of a Jew's, quote, choosing to be part of the Jewish people. That's on Jewish 101 at 7. Then at 8, President and founder of the Reut Institute, Gidi Gernstein, talks about criticisms of Zionism from within the Jewish world. That's from the recent Limud 2014 conference. And then at 9, take a look inside Hebron on a fascinating tour with resident and guide David Wilder. That's all coming up tonight here on Shalom TV and shalomtv.com. And that's Shalom TV's news update for Thursday, April the 3rd, 2014. I'm Teisha Bader.